scary Peppa Pig episode that never aired, The Mirror Game. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon when Peppa and George discovered an old mirror in Grandpa Pig's attic. The mirror was ornate, with a heavy golden frame that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. "Look, George, we can play the mirror game," Peppa exclaimed, standing in front of the glass. "You copy everything I do." At first, it was fun. Peppa would wave, and George would wave back. She would jump, and he would jump too. But then Peppa noticed something strange in the reflection. Her mirror image was moving just a fraction of a second too late. "George, look at this," she whispered, raising her hand slowly. In the mirror, her reflection hesitated before copying the movement. George giggled, thinking it was part of the game, but when he looked at his own reflection, his smile faded. His mirror self was smiling wider than he was, showing teeth that seemed too sharp. "Peppa," George whispered, but when he looked at his sister, she was staring intently at the mirror, her eyes glazed over. In the reflection, Peppa saw herself in the same attic, but everything was slightly wrong. The boxes were in different places, the light was dimmer, and there was someone else there, another Peppa, watching from the shadows. "Who are you?" the real Peppa asked her reflection. "The mirror." Peppa tilted her head and smiled. "I'm you, but better. I don't have to listen to Mummy and Daddy. I can do whatever I want." George tugged at Peppa's dress, but she didn't respond. She was completely absorbed by the conversation with her reflection. "Would you like to switch places?" the mirror Peppa asked. "You could stay here where it's quiet, and I could go live your life." The real Peppa found herself nodding. The mirror world looked so peaceful, so perfect. No rules, no bedtime, no vegetables to eat. "Just touch the glass," the mirror Peppa instructed. As Peppa reached toward the mirror, George saw something terrifying. In the reflection, there were dozens of other children behind the mirror Peppa, all the children who had made the same choice. They stood motionless, their eyes empty, trapped forever in the glass world. "Peppa, no!" George shouted, grabbing her hand just as her fingers touched the cold surface. The mirror rippled like water. For a moment, Peppa felt herself being pulled forward, but George's grip held her back. The mirror Peppa's face twisted with anger. "You can't stop this forever," the reflection hissed. "I'll be waiting. Every mirror, every reflection, every piece of glass. I'll be there waiting for my chance." The children ran from the attic, but as they passed every mirror in Grandpa Pig's house, they saw her, the other Peppa, following them, watching them, waiting. Even now, when Peppa brushes her teeth or George washes his hands, they see her in the bathroom mirror. She waves at them, smiles at them, and whispers promises of a world where they could be free. But they never touch the glass again, because they know that some games are too dangerous to play, and some reflections show more than just what's real.
A lost Peppa Pig episode that never aired on TV. Night fell upon Peppa Pig's house. The room was silent, disturbed only by the faint creaking of old floorboards. Peppa, lying on the top bunk, couldn't sleep. She heard the steady breathing of George, sleeping below. Suddenly, from under the bottom bunk, a quiet, barely discernible sound, like a whisper, reached her ears. It was so faint that Peppa initially thought she had imagined it. But the whisper repeated, a little louder this time, and now it seemed insistent, as if someone was trying to get her attention. Peppa cautiously leaned over the edge of her bunk, trying to make out anything in the darkness. Nothing was visible, but the whisper continued, and now it seemed very close, as if someone was breathing right into her ear. Peppa felt goosebumps prickle her skin. She slowly slid off the bed and onto the floor. The whisper was coming from under George's bed. She cautiously peered underneath. Nothing was visible in the darkness, but the whisper intensified, and now it was accompanied by a faint, rhythmic tapping, as if someone was gently scratching wood. Peppa reached out to feel for the source of the sound, and her fingers brushed against something soft and cold. It was a small rag doll that George always kept with him. The doll was lying face down, and Peppa carefully turned it over. The doll's eyes were empty buttons, but now they glowed with a dull, greenish light. From its mouth, which was just a drawn line, came the same whisper. The doll began to move slowly in Peppa's hands, its small arms and legs twitching as if it was trying to break free. The whisper grew louder, turning into a chorus of children's voices repeating the same word. Play, play. Peppa tried to throw the doll away, but her hands seemed glued to it. The doll pressed against her, its cold body penetrating through her clothes, freezing Peppa from within. The voices grew louder, filling the room, penetrating every cell of her body. Peppa felt her consciousness begin to blur and reality distort. She saw shadows on the walls begin to dance, taking on bizarre forms, and the furniture in the room seemed to come alive. The last thing Peppa saw were the doll's glowing green eyes, staring at her with inexpressible longing, and her own reflection in them, distorted by terror. Then, darkness consumed her. In the morning, Mummy Pig and Daddy Pig entered the room. The beds were empty. Only the old rag doll lay on the floor, from which a quiet, barely discernible whisper and tapping could be heard. And sometimes, in the quietest hours of the night, if you pass by this house, you might hear that sound coming from the room and see two dull green dots glowing in the darkness, as if someone is still waiting to play. The visitor from the wall. When it was raining outside, Peppa and George were playing in their room. Everything was as usual: blocks, toys, laughter. But then Peppa noticed something strange. A crack in the wall right next to her bed seemed bigger than before, and inside it, there was something that looked like a face. At first, she thought she was imagining it. Maybe it was just a drop of water running down the wall. But when she looked again, eyes, narrow, dark, motionless, and a mouth stretched into a long, thin smile. Peppa blinked, and the face was gone. She didn't say anything to George. She just turned away and went to sleep, telling herself it was only her imagination. But the next night, she saw it again. The face was closer, and now it moved. Not quickly, no, slowly, almost imperceptibly, as if it was sliding beneath the layers of wallpaper. It was like watching a fish beneath the ice. Its eyes moved. They were watching Peppa. Peppa told Mummy Pig, but she only said that maybe the wall was a bit damp. Daddy Pig promised to patch the crack. But when he entered the room with his tools that evening, there was no crack. On the third night, Peppa woke up to a rustling sound. George was asleep, covered completely with his blanket. Peppa slowly turned toward the wall. Now the face was very close. It filled the whole crack. And then it came out. First came a hand, grey, thin, with long fingers like it was made of paper. Then the second hand. It was pulling itself out, blending with the color of the wallpaper. Its body was flat, as if it had always been part of the wall. It made no sound, only movement, slowly, smiling. Peppa couldn't scream. She was frozen, watching as the thing emerged. It had no legs. Its lower body just faded into the air. It slid across the floor, leaving a wet grey trail behind. It approached George's bed and stopped. A few long seconds, and then it disappeared. When the parents came in the morning, Peppa was sitting on her bed staring at the wall. George was asleep, but he never woke up again. The doctors couldn't explain it. They said his heart just stopped. Since then, Peppa no longer sleeps in that room. The wall was painted over, new wallpaper was put up. But sometimes, if you look closely at the pattern, you can see it shifting, as if something is moving underneath, and if you stare long enough, it smiles again. Peppa Pig. The school that isn't there. It all started on a Monday. Madame Gazelle told the class that today's lessons would be held in the old building, a place where children used to study long ago. "It's just nearby," she said. "A short walk for a change of scenery." Peppa was surprised. No one had ever mentioned another school, not teachers, not even her parents. The children walked along a narrow path outside the town. The wind grew stronger. The sun hid behind clouds. Soon, a building appeared. grey, cracked, with tall, narrow windows. It was unnaturally quiet. "Is it on the map?" asked Pedro. Madame Gazelle smiled but didn't answer. Inside it was dim. The walls were stained. The doors creaked. They were led to a classroom at the end of the hall. Desks were crooked. Chairs didn't match. On the board, faint scratches remained, as if someone had written with a nail. "We're only here for one day," said Madame Gazelle. "Start drawing." But Peppa couldn't focus. The classroom window faced an empty field. But each time she looked away and back again, it felt like someone was standing behind the glass. Footsteps echoed in the hall, though no one had left. Sometimes there was a soft creaking sound, and then whispers, very close to the floor. During break, the children walked to the stairs. "Let's go up," Zoe suggested. Madame Gazelle appeared suddenly. "You mustn't go upstairs." Her voice sounded strange, muffled, as if coming from far away. The day crawled by slowly. The hallway clock didn't tick. Pedro said the mirrors in the bathroom were all covered with paper. Rebecca noticed Madame Gazelle's coat had buttons sewn on the wrong side. When it was finally time to leave, the children were relieved. But it was already getting dark outside, though it should have been early afternoon. Madame Gazelle told them to walk in a line. Peppa lingered, looking back. Figures stood in the windows, still, shadowy. They didn't move, but they were watching. That evening, Peppa opened a map on her tablet. The school they visited wasn't there. She showed Daddy Pig. "We were here today," she said, "but there's nothing on the map." Daddy Pig looked closely. "There hasn't been anything here for years, Peppa. I've walked by that spot hundreds of times, just a field." "But we were inside," Peppa insisted. Daddy shrugged. "Maybe it was a temporary structure, something old, but it shouldn't be there." That night, Peppa couldn't sleep. Before bed, she opened her backpack. At the bottom lay a scrap of paper, dusty, crumpled. On it, a message scratched in black charcoal. "We are still here." Peppa Pig, The Cracks. It started as just a tiny line, almost invisible in the corner of Peppa's bedroom. She thought it was just a crack in the paint. Maybe someone had bumped into the wall. "Mummy, look," she said that evening, pointing. Mummy Pig glanced over, nodded and said, "The house has probably settled a bit. Nothing to worry about. Daddy will fix it." But Daddy forgot, and the crack stayed. The next day, Peppa noticed it had grown longer. Now it stretched upward slightly, like a tree branch reaching toward the ceiling. "That's strange," she muttered. "Maybe I'm imagining it." But each day, the crack grew, first thin, then a little wider. After a few days, it curved unnaturally, like someone had drawn it with a finger. More cracks appeared nearby, one, then another. "Is our house okay?" Peppa asked Daddy Pig. "Of course," he laughed. "Walls crack sometimes. We'll fix it." They never did. A week later, the whole wall was laced with thin cracks. Some of them vanished during the day, only to return by night. One night, Peppa woke up and saw the crack moving, slightly, as if something inside was breathing. She got out of bed and walked closer, pressed her ear against it. Inside, a sound. Very quiet. Scraping. A knock. Slow. 3 taps. A pause. 2 more. Peppa jumped back. "George," she whispered. Her brother was asleep, breathing steadily. In the morning, she found a small, dusty scrap of paper beneath the crack. Very old, almost falling apart. On it, a single word. Open. Peppa didn't tell her parents. She covered the crack with bandages, several layers, then hung a picture over it. But by nightfall, the picture had fallen. The tape was torn away. New lines appeared on the wall, not cracks anymore, almost like letters. She backed away to the door, but the door wouldn't open. Something inside the wall was moving, slowly, like it was exhaling. She screamed. Mummy and Daddy rushed in. It's, Peppa gasped, pointing. But on the wall, nothing, no cracks, no words. just a perfectly smooth surface. "You probably had a bad dream," said Mummy Pig gently. "Let's try to forget about it." But Peppa couldn't forget, because that night, when she turned to face the wall, she saw movement right where the crack had been, and then a voice, a whisper. "I'm almost out. Don't turn around." Peppa Pig, the wrong drawing. It started quietly, almost unnoticed. George was quietly sitting at the kitchen table with crayons and a large sheet of paper. Daddy Pig was sipping tea. Mummy Pig was reading a magazine. Peppa came closer and saw George was drawing children. "Is that your class?" she asked. "Yes," he nodded. "All of them." In the drawing stood Rebecca, Zoe, Pedro, Danny, everyone Peppa knew. But they all had the same eyes, black dots. Their smiles were long and flat. They stood in the same pose, arms hanging down, on a white background. Even George's dinosaur was drawn, a bit to the side and with the same eyes. "Why are you drawing them?" "Just so they'll be here, always." Peppa frowned, but said nothing. The next morning at school, the teacher said Rebecca didn't come in, then Zoe didn't come, then Pedro. Every day someone was missing. No explanations, no notes from parents. "Maybe they're sick," said Mummy Pig. "All at once," Peppa whispered. One evening, she walked into George's room and saw him drawing again. Another sheet, the same figures, the same emptiness. But now there were shadows in the background, long, like the sun was shining from behind, and their eyes were different, darker, deeper. "What is this?" "They're standing, still. You didn't draw me too, did you?" He didn't answer. Peppa went to the drawer and pulled out the old drawings, all the same, and each time someone disappeared in real life, but appeared again on paper. That night, she woke up. The nightlight flickered. The room was cold. George was standing at the door, holding a piece of paper in his hooves. "I drew you," he said. "George, please." Peppa's heart started to pound. "You're standing in the back of the class, next to Rebecca." "I don't want to. I shouldn't be there." Too late. He stepped closer, showed her the drawing. Peppa looked at her image. It was empty, no eyes, no mouth, just a silhouette. And at the bottom of the page, a note. "You're the last one." Peppa tore the drawing from George's hooves, ran to the kitchen, and threw it into the stove. The paper caught fire. She waited until it turned to ash. But when she turned around, George stood at the door with a new sheet. I remembered it. That night, she locked her door, shut the window, hid the crayons. But she still heard scratching on the floor. Steady, slow. In the morning, she opened the desk drawer. A paper lay there, blank. Only in the corner, a faint shadow, small, shaped like her, and a note. "It's already too late.